Imagine this. You're standing on a quiet beach in Florida. The waves are gentle. The sky is soft pink from the setting sun. And for a moment, everything feels perfectly calm. Then you notice something strange. The tide retreats. Fast, too fast. Birds explode out of the trees and flee inland. Dogs start barking. Car alarms begin screaming for no reason. And beneath your feet, you feel it. A vibration. Not a jolt, not a rumble. A deep, low-frequency hum, a sound you don't hear with your ears. You feel it inside your bones. A sound that seems to rise from the center of the earth itself. People look around in confusion. Someone laughs nervously. A mother calls for her kids. But then the sand shifts, as if the beach itself is breathing. And suddenly, every phone in a 200-mile radius buzzes with the same terrifying alert. Mega seismic activity detected. Seek immediate safety. Nobody knows what it means. The message is too vague, too impossible. But deep beneath the Atlantic, something ancient is waking. Something that hasn't happened in 250 million years. The forgotten scar of Pangaea. Far below the ocean floor, hidden beneath layers of rock older than dinosaurs, lies a wound. A scar left behind when the supercontinent Pangaea tore itself apart. Most people don't know this, but the Atlantic Ocean isn't just an ocean, it's a growing crack. A crack that still widens every year. But what if one day it didn't widen slowly? What if the forces tearing the continents apart suddenly snapped? What if the tension of 200 million years released all at once? Geologists call this nightmare scenario the Pangaea Superquake. A quake so large, so violent, so utterly world-breaking that it could split continents like dry bread. Not just collapse cities, not just destroy coastlines, not just trigger tsunamis. No, this monster would shake the entire Earth from South America to Africa, from New York to London, from Antarctica to Asia, all at the same time. But this is just theory, right? Just a scary idea. A geological what-if, at least. That's what we used to think. The secret the ocean hid for millions of years 1 year ago. A research team mapping the Atlantic seafloor detected something strange. A cluster of small tremors, all arranged in a perfect line, stretching for nearly 2,000 miles. At first, they thought it was noise, faulty sensors, a glitch. But then the tremors grew, not stronger, just more frequent, more synchronized, like a heartbeat. The team joked nervously. Looks like the Earth is trying to split open again. They didn't know how right they were. When they sent robotic drones down to investigate, the cameras captured something terrifying. A fresh crack in the seafloor, long, dark, still widening, and from deep inside it came the impossible sound of rushing water and escaping gas, as if the planet itself was exhaling after millions of years. Scientists tried to hide the footage. They didn't want a panic, but a week later, the tremors reached Florida and that beach where you felt the hum beneath your feet. That was only the beginning, because the crack wasn't just growing, it was accelerating. And if the line kept spreading at that speed, it would reach the continental shelf in just 3 days. 3 days before the Atlantic splits open. 3 days before mega tsunamis begin. 3 days before global communication collapses. 3 days before the largest earthquake in Earth's history hits every continent at once. 3 days before Earth attempts to become Pangaea again. For the first few hours, nothing seems unusual. The news mentions minor seismic fluctuations, But they quickly move on to politics, sports, weather, anything but the truth, because the truth is still hiding miles below the surface, where no one can see it, but where something ancient has already begun to move. Deep underground, the Earth's crust tightens like a muscle, preparing to tear. This isn't just a shift, or a tremor, or a routine tectonic hiccup. This is the slow, grinding inhale of a planet remembering a scar it once tried to forget. Miles beneath the surface, sensors begin picking up vibrations that don't belong to any known fault system. The readings aren't local, they're global. Seismic lines light up across the world, like someone switched on a hidden network that was asleep for 200 million years. In research labs across the US, confused scientists stare at screens that make no sense. The vibrations are too synchronized, too uniform, too deep. It's as if the Earth's crust is responding to a command issued long before humans existed. And then, one by one, the seismic monitors begin to lock. The signals fall perfectly into alignment, pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat, but not a human heartbeat, a planetary one. By mid-afternoon, underground fiber optic cables in California, Nevada, Oklahoma, and even the East Coast begin showing distortions. Water pipes burst in neighborhoods without earthquakes. Small objects vibrate on tables. Dogs howl at walls. Animals across the Midwest start migrating in the wrong direction, fleeing from something people cannot yet feel. But the pressure keeps rising. It moves slowly, painfully slowly, but deliberately, as if following a path that was carved long before cities existed. A path older than mountains, older than continents, older than the oceans themselves. The line is invisible, buried beneath miles of rock, but it is there, a faint, ancient seam that once held Earth together, when all the continents were still fused as one. The forgotten scar of Pangaea. Most geologists believe it healed millions of years ago, but tonight the planet is remembering, and the first visible sign appears in the most unexpected place, a massive U.S. railroad junction in Nebraska. Workers report that the steel tracks begin trembling, not shaking from above, but humming from below, like a tuning fork pressed against the earth. The vibration spreads, traveling outward in both directions, faster than any wave of motion should travel. But it isn't an earthquake, it's a signal. Then it reaches the surface. A shockwave blasts upward so fast and so violently that it blows a 200-foot geyser of dirt and rock into the night sky. The explosion doesn't come from heat or gas or magma. It comes from pressure. Pure, crushing, continental pressure being forced upward through the weakest point in the crust. Within minutes, farmers 40 miles away report something terrifying. Their fields begin sinking, not collapsing. Sinking as if the ground itself is exhaling. Roads buckle, barns tilt. A water tower leans so sharply it looks frozen in the moment before falling. And then, across U.S. phones, from California to New York, an alert cuts through every screen. Megaseismic activity detected. Seek immediate safety. People stop. Cars pull over. Families stare at their phones in disbelief. No one has ever seen an alert like this. Not for earthquakes, not for storms, not for anything. But the ground beneath them continues to hum, the vibration growing deeper, stronger, more deliberate. It doesn't fade like a normal tremor. It builds, slowly, terrifyingly. Sensors from NASA, NOAA, and USGS begin reporting a single horrifying conclusion. This is not a normal earthquake. This is not a regional fault line awakening. This is not anything we have ever recorded. This is the reactivation of a prehistoric continental fracture, a scar that once split supercontinents and could do it again. And tonight, as the tremors begin to synchronize across North America, one thing becomes clear. Earth is preparing to move in a way it has not moved in hundreds of millions of years. The continent is beginning to stretch, not violently, not suddenly, but with a slow, steady force that feels purposeful, as if the land itself remembers where it once broke apart and is ready to finish the job. The tremors don't arrive like normal earthquakes. There's no single jolt, no violent shaking, no sudden crash of dishes or slamming doors. Instead, the vibration becomes rhythmic, pulsing, a steady, impossible thump that people can feel more than hear, a pressure in the chest, a low hum in the teeth, like standing beside a giant unseen machine. Across America, millions of people step outside, confused and disturbed. Streetlights flicker without wind. Dogs cower under cars. Birds abandon trees and take to the sky in frantic circles. And then something happens that no one can ignore. The asphalt begins to ripple, not crack, ripple, as if the ground is suddenly fluid, soft as warm wax. Roads bulge upward, then settle again. Highway dividers tilt. Parking lots rise and fall like the surface of a sleeping beast. Phones light up everywhere with videos. The ground is breathing. What the hell is happening? Dude, my driveway is moving. The vibration intensifies. Deep, oceanic, ancient. And beneath that hum, another sound emerges. A slow, stretching groan. Not from buildings, not from metal, from the earth itself. The noise is so low, it barely registers as sound. More like a pressure wave passing through bones. People instinctively cover their ears, even though the sound is below human hearing. A resonance that feels like it's coming from the planet's core. In control rooms across the US, scientists scramble to understand the impossible. The data doesn't match any seismic pattern in the modern world, but it does resemble something from the deep past, reconstructed from rock, strata, and ancient fault scars. This is the signature of a continent preparing to tear, not today, not in a single catastrophic moment, but starting now. And the first rupture appears in Kansas. A rancher miles from any town is the first to hear it, a sharp, percussive crack beneath the soil. For a second, it sounds like distant thunder, but then it repeats, and again, and again. The cracks multiply, rapid fire, coming from every direction like 1,000 tree trunks snapping at once. Then the floor of the earth splits open. Not a dramatic canyon, not yet, but a razor-thin, pitch-black line that races across an empty field with terrifying speed. The crack slices through dry soil, through grass, through a barbed wire fence that snaps apart and flies into the air, and the line keeps going. Within minutes, drones capture the first satellite view, a hairline fracture stretching more than 40 miles in a perfect, dead straight line. Too straight, too clean, too deliberate. It is not a surface-level crack. It is the reemergence of an ancient tectonic boundary, a place where Earth once pulled itself apart, back when dinosaurs had not yet taken their first breath, and that's only the beginning. The ground begins to warm, not blistering hot, but warm enough to steam after rainfall, warm enough to turn frost into mist, warm enough that barefoot children playing in their yards scream and jump away as the soil begins radiating heat from deep below. This isn't magma, It's friction, continental scale friction, the grinding of rock slabs miles thick, moving against each other for the first time in hundreds of millions of years, and it's accelerating. In Chicago, commuters on the L train feel the steel tracks vibrate like guitar strings. In Texas, oil wells shut down automatically as their sensors detect stress signals that shouldn't exist. In New York, skyscrapers sway almost imperceptibly, alarms blaring even though the ground below remains still. On a quiet suburban street in Colorado, an elderly man steps into his backyard and watches his entire garden shift 3 inches to the left in one fluid motion, like someone dragged the entire plot with invisible hands. But the most alarming sign appears in the Mississippi River. The river begins to tilt, not rise, not overflow, tilt. Water levels on one bank rise several inches while the opposite bank sinks. Barges scrape against the riverbed. Pilots radio in panicked reports. It's like the river's trying to change direction. But it's not the water, it's the continent. The earth is stretching beneath it, and still the vibration grows deeper, stronger, more coordinated. The fault system that once split the supercontinent Pangaea is reawakening, not as a single crack, but as a network, a geometric pattern etched beneath the ground, like an ancient blueprint. Scientists begin arguing loudly, urgently, about what this means. Some insist the rupture could continue for decades. Others warn that if the pressure spikes even slightly more, we could witness a once-in-a-billion-years event, a continent beginning to split in real time. But no one truly understands what's happening. No one knows how far it will go. And no one is ready for what comes next, because the vibration suddenly stops, completely. You could hear a pin drop across an entire nation. Animals freeze birds go silent. Every phone, every signal, every sensor falls quiet. The ground becomes still, eerily, impossibly still. And then, from the deep earth, one single catastrophic jolt. Not upward, not sideways, downward. The entire central United States drops by 8 inches in the span of half a second. Not enough to destroy cities, not enough to topple buildings, but enough to terrify 300 million people. Enough to reveal one horrifying truth. The rupture isn't stopping, it's accelerating. The earth has taken its first breath. And now the second is coming. Before anyone has time to process what just happened, before news anchors can finish their sentences, before scientists can compare notes, before parents can even get their children back inside, the second pulse begins. It doesn't feel like a tremor this time. It feels like movement. Slow, steady, undeniable movement. As if the entire foundation of the continent shifts 1 single inch to the west. In living rooms, cups slide across tables. In grocery stores, products inch down shelves. In offices, pens and paper drift just slightly toward the same direction. It's so subtle that most people don't notice at first. But every seismometer on Earth notices. And they all begin screaming at once. The sensors don't show waves, they show drift. Actual tectonic drift, happening at a speed visible to the naked eye. The impossible is becoming real. The continent is beginning to stretch. Across the Midwest, barn walls groan as their wooden frames twist. Bridge joints creak like old ships at sea. Railway tracks grow taut, stretching by centimeters, then snapping back into alignment with metallic twangs that echo for miles. And beneath Kansas, that original razor-line crack, something new appears. Heat, not volcanic heat, not magma, friction heat. Drone cameras show thin plumes of steam rising from the fracture, curling into the cold morning air. Farmers step outside, expecting a burst pipe, only to find warm soil that now carries the faint metallic smell of disturbed earth. Then comes the sound, a long, rolling thunder, but not from the sky. It comes from below, deep below, like a mountain range collapsing in slow motion somewhere in the bowels of the planet. The noise rolls outward in all directions, shaking windows and rattling bones, creeping across states like a massive, unseen avalanche. People instinctively look up, but the danger isn't above, it's beneath them. Roads split, not violently, but with a slow, widening ease, like they're made of soft clay. Cracks form in perfect parallel sets, stretching for miles, following the ancient, buried fault lines that once navigated the seams of Pangaea. Scientists finally have enough data to understand the pattern, and what they find chills them to the core. This isn't a normal tectonic slip. This is synchronous motion. Multiple ancient fault systems across the continent are moving at the same time, in the same direction, at the same rhythm. It's as if something deep within the mantle has caught hold of the North American plate and is gently pulling it apart. In New York, skyscrapers react before people do. The tallest buildings sway an inch, not because of shaking, but because the ground beneath them is subtly changing shape. In a high-rise apartment, a woman watches her chandelier begin turning slowly, not swinging, but rotating, because the building's frame is shifting so gradually it feels like the planet itself is exhaling beneath her feet. In California, geologists stare at monitors showing something they've never seen before: the San Andreas Fault moving in reverse. The pressure on the normally locked sections decreases slightly, as if the entire western edge of the continent is relaxing. But the relaxation doesn't bring relief, it brings dread, because the new Madrid Fault, the ancient monster beneath the central U.S., the fault responsible for some of the strongest quakes in American history, begins to glow on heat maps. Not bright, not alarming, but awake. It hasn't been truly active since the 1800s. But now, sensors detect micro-cracking miles beneath the surface, the first signs of reactivation. And then the Mississippi River tilts again, this time dramatically. Barges tip sideways, cargo sliding into the water. Pilots panic as the river appears to shift direction mid-journey. Whole banks slump by inches, sending trees toppling into the muddy water in slow, graceful arcs. Satellite imagery shows the truth. The land on one side of the river is rising. The land on the other side is sinking. A hinge, a flex point, a newborn continental boundary line. Every major geological institute in the world sends an emergency alert within minutes. The Pangaea Rift system has reactivated, but ordinary people don't need the warning. They can feel it. In schools, children cry because their desks are moving by themselves. In hospitals, beds slide half an inch, causing doctors to freeze in mid-sentence. In churches, priests stop sermons as the stained glass windows hum with vibrations that aren't quite sound. And across the country, millions of people step outside just in time to see something they will never forget. The horizon moves, not the sun, not clouds. The actual line of the earth in the distance shifts, drops slightly, rises slightly, then settles again, as if the crust were flexing like the surface of a breathing giant. People scream, others pray. Some just freeze, unable to comprehend what their eyes are telling them. The United States has just undergone the largest single-surface displacement ever recorded, and it's only getting stronger. Because in the next moment, the ground takes a third breath, and this one is not gentle, not slow, not forgiving. The third breath is the one that changes everything. The third pulse doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rumble like thunder or whisper like shifting soil. It detonates, not as an explosion, not as a boom, but as a sudden, violent lurch of the continent that knocks half the country off its feet. People who were standing are suddenly on the ground. People who were sitting are suddenly thrown forward. Cars skid sideways. Shopping carts roll. Dogs yelp as floors slide beneath their paws. But then something far stranger happens. The lurch doesn't stop. Normally, earthquakes shake, now left, now right, fracturing the ground with rapid oscillations. But this does not shake, this moves. A solid, continuous push. The entire central block of North America shifts several feet eastward in one horrifying motion. For a split second, it feels like gravity itself has tilted. Buildings groan as their foundations drag. Streetlights bend backward. Glass shatters across dozens of states, forming crystalline rain on city streets. In underground tunnels, subway rails twist like licorice. Trains come to screeching halts as their wheels lose alignment. Passengers cling to poles that suddenly feel like they're sliding sideways. Then the sound follows, a deafening, metallic tearing, like a skyscraper-sized steel beam being ripped in half beneath the crust. It echoes through the earth, a deep, bellowing roar that seems to vibrate through bones and teeth. And the fracture in Kansas, the one that started this entire nightmare, opens wider. Satellite feed shows the impossible. The single hairline crack has become a yawning wound, stretching nearly 400 meters across at some points. And from deep within it, something glows. Not magma, too stable. Not fire, too steady. It's pressure light. Crushed minerals shearing under forces they haven't felt in 200 million years. The continents aren't just moving, they're separating. Emergency broadcasts across the nation blare the same message in monotone robotic voices. Major crustal displacement detected. Seek open ground. Avoid bridges and structures. But there is no open ground safe from this. Highways ripple like sheets in the wind. Concrete buckles in huge, graceful arcs. Entire parking lots rise and fall like waves on an invisible sea. In some places, the displacement happens so violently that old riverbeds awaken. Dry land suddenly sinks into serpent-shaped depressions. Water rushing in as nature redraws its own map. The Mississippi River becomes chaos, swirling, reversing, splitting around newly risen islands of mud and rock that weren't there 30 seconds ago. And beneath the river, the new Madrid Fault finally snaps. Not the full rupture, not yet, but a preliminary slip, like a titan flexing its muscles after 1,000-year sleep. This slip sends a shockwave north, where the bedrock of Illinois fractures in a perfectly straight line through cornfields, cutting fences, splitting driveways, dividing entire neighborhoods into two separate elevations. Families stand outside, staring at each other across a new drop-off, a miniature cliff that wasn't there an hour ago. And all across the country, millions of people feel something they can't explain. A strange, rhythmic swaying, not sharp, not violent, just a slow, nauseating movement. Like the continent is floating. But it's not floating, it's loosening. Under the Rocky Mountains, miles-deep sensors begin reporting zero stability in certain parts of the North American plate. The rigid slab that defined the continent is behaving more like a cluster of giant tiles being pried apart. And then the most terrifying part begins. The pressure centers migrate. At first, all the activity was in the central US now. New hotspots ignite like red stars on global seismic maps, one in the Gulf of Mexico, one beneath the Great Lakes, one, shockingly, off the coast of the Carolinas. Each hotspot pulses in the same rhythm as the main rift, as if they're communicating, as if the entire continent is preparing for a single coordinated event. Scientists watching the data streams begin to ask the one question no one wants to hear. What if this isn't a series of quakes? What if this is the beginning of a full continental breakup? And then, just as the third breath reaches its climax, something unprecedented happens. For the first time since this nightmare began, the entire continent stops moving. A chilling, dead stillness. Not peaceful, not calm. A silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. Dogs stop barking. Wind stops blowing. Even the faint mechanical hum of cities seems to dim. It's the kind of silence that only comes before catastrophe. Because the fourth movement, the real one, is coming. And this time, it won't be a breath. It will be a break. The stillness doesn't last long. At first, it feels like the world is frozen, like someone pressed pause on the entire continent. No shaking, no groaning, no shifting. Even birds fall silent, their instincts screaming at them to flee, though they don't yet know where. And then the pressure returns, not as a rumble this time, but as a deep, resonant hum. So low it's almost below human hearing. A sound that vibrates through chest cavities, rattles windows without breaking them, and triggers an ancient part of the brain that whispers, something enormous is moving. Seismic monitors begin picking up waveforms they've never recorded before, impossibly slow oscillations that ripple not just through soil and rock, but through the very structure of the North American plate. The hum rises. The ground doesn't shake. The ground thrums. And then, without warning, the pressure releases in a single, terrifying motion. The fourth movement begins. The continent doesn't lurch this time. It slides, a steady, unstoppable, grinding shove, like a massive stone door being pushed open by a god. The fracture that runs through Kansas widens again, this time with horrifying speed. Meters widen into tens of meters. Tens widen into hundreds. People living miles from the rift feel the ground gently slant under their feet, the faintest tilt, but unmistakable. Roads begin drifting apart. Crops split down the middle in perfectly straight dividing lines. Entire forest sections shear away from each other like drifting ice flows. And then the real nightmare starts. A second fracture appears, not near the first, not connected at all. It appears in Tennessee. A long, jagged cut tears across farmland with a booming crack so loud residents describe it as the sky splitting. The earth opens 11 feet in seconds. Barns collapse into the newly formed chasm. Highways tear like paper, cars dropping nose first into a dark abyss. Scientists watching the satellite feeds realize the impossible. These fractures are aligning, as if tracing the ancient seam of Pangaea. Lines that were once part of the original supercontinents joining edges, invisible now, erased by 250 million years, are reawakening. And they're not random. They're systematic. The continent is trying to follow its old fault lines, as if Earth remembers. The hum turns into a scream, a deafening, metallic shriek erupts beneath the Mississippi River, the tectonic equivalent of steel rails grinding under impossible strain. The New Madrid Fault doesn't slip this time. It rips, a full rupture. The ground convulses. The river leaps out of its bed like a living thing. Entire housing developments drop several feet in less than a second. Water surges backward. Boats overturn. Bridges crack like brittle crackers. The Mississippi splits into two separate waterways, one flowing north, one south, each carving its own chaotic path through torn earth. Sirens across the central U.S. erupt at once, a cacophony of wailing alarms and monotone emergency broadcasts. Seek immediate open ground. Continental displacement is occurring. But for millions of people, there is no open ground left. The land itself is fragmenting beneath their feet. The hotspots ignite. Remember the three hotspots: the Gulf, the Great Lakes, the Atlantic Shelf. At the exact same moment, all three begin to collapse. In the Gulf of Mexico, the seafloor drops more than 12 feet, displacing massive volumes of water. Cruise ships tilt violently. Oil rigs buckle. Waves begin radiating outward in growing rings. Near Michigan, the bedrock under Lake Superior shifts, generating a shock wave that rolls across the water like a massive underwater explosion, except there was no explosion, just rock moving miles beneath. And off the coast of the Carolinas, the Atlantic Shelf fractures in a long, sinister curve. The ocean hesitates, then pours into the widening crack. A pillar of steam blasts upward as superheated rock reacts to cold seawater. White clouds rise like ghosts from the wound in the seafloor. For the first time, scientists see what they feared. These aren't isolated quakes. This is a plate beginning to tear itself apart. The continent wobbles. You know how a cracked plate wobbles when you hold it. The slightest pressure makes the whole thing tremble because it's no longer one solid piece. Now imagine that on the scale of North America, a strange, rolling sway moves across the entire landmass. Not a wave, not a quake, but a weird, nauseating tilt that lasts 8 horrifying seconds. Skyscrapers bend, but do not fall. Lakes slosh like stirred soup bowls. People feel momentarily weightless, then twice as heavy as the gravity vector shifts ever so slightly. Airplanes in flight report sudden altitude drops of hundreds of feet as atmospheric flow destabilizes. The Earth's crust isn't just cracking, it's unanchored. The edges of the North American plate from Alaska to Mexico begin drifting at slightly different speeds, measured in millimeters per second, that feel insignificant, until you realize that means meters per hour. Fast enough to tear cities in half, fast enough to redraw coastlines in real time, fast enough to shatter the illusion of a stable world. And then, as if the continent is taking one final inhale before the kill shot, everything stops again. Another silence, another dead, heavy, impossible pause. The kind of pause that only comes when something larger than life, something older than humanity, is preparing to act. But the next movement won't be a breath, won't be a slide, won't be a tilt. The next movement will be the one scientists prayed would never come. The fifth movement, the moment the cracks connect, the moment the continent stops being one piece, the moment North America begins to break. The silence after the fourth movement lingers just a moment too long, a moment that feels wrong, heavy, artificial, like the world is holding its breath, not out of peace, but out of terror. Animals sense it first. Wolves pause mid-stride. Horses refuse to move. Birds burst from forests in desperate, screaming flocks, abandoning nests and young as if the ground under them is cursed. In cities, people stand frozen, listening, not to a sound, but to the absence of sound. Every instinct in the human body knows what comes next. And then the earth exhales, not softly, not gently, but in a single, monstrous detonation from deep below the crust. The cracks connect Kansas, Tennessee, Missouri, Michigan, the Carolinas, the Gulf. 6 fractures, 6 widening wounds, all moving, all spreading, all creeping toward each other. And now, at last, they meet. The moment they touch, the continent reacts like a shattered bone finally giving way. A deafening continental-scale crack explodes across the land, a sound so massive it rolls across the entire U.S. like thunder made of metal. Forest canopies sway. Windows shatter by the millions. Deep underground pipelines snap like uncooked spaghetti. Then the ground moves, not shaking, not sliding. It drops. Large portions of the central U.S. collapse, several feet in one catastrophic motion, forming a jagged, irregular scar stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes. Highways buckle, houses tilt, rail lines twist and curl. People watch as the land under them sinks not into a clean, neat valley, but into a chaotic, broken labyrinth of tilted plates and rising ridges. North America is no longer a single, solid piece. It is now 2, and they begin drifting apart. The new sea opens. The Mississippi River, already torn into 2 halves, suddenly finds itself without a path. Water swirls in massive whirlpools where the new basin collapses beneath it. Then, with a roar like an ocean falling out of the sky, the Gulf of Mexico surges inward. A massive, unstoppable wall of water tears across Louisiana, swallowing entire towns in minutes. The wave races north, filling the widening chasm like the earth is birthing a new ocean. The incoming water meets the fractured Great Lakes drainage from the north, and for a moment, the 2 water systems collide in a violent, boiling clash, but soon they merge. The Gulf and the lakes become one. Salt water and fresh water swirling in a newborn, continent-splitting sea. The world has just watched the first moments of the new mid-continental ocean. What once took tens of millions of years in Earth's past just happened in a single day. The eastern seaboard begins to pull away. The tearing doesn't stop at the center. The edges respond. From New York to Miami, the Atlantic coastline groans under immense stress. Skyscrapers sway. Old fault lines reactivate. Sections of the coastline sink inches, then feet. A rift opens offshore, a long, deep, sinister gash in the seafloor running parallel to the east coast. Water pours into it. Steam erupts. Submarine landslides generate a series of tidal waves that slam into coastal cities. People on the coasts do not realize it yet, but they are watching the beginning of a new continental boundary. The eastern half of North America is beginning to detach, not fast, not dramatically, but undeniably, like tectonic Velcro, slowly being peeled apart. The West feels it. Old faults in Utah and Nevada jump to life. The San Andreas shivers like a wire pulled tight. For the first time, scientists worry that the continental breakup may propagate westward, but the western plate edge holds, barely. The shaking is brutal, but the West survives. The East will not be so lucky. The day's final rupture as night falls. A final seismic roar erupts beneath the Appalachian region, the last piece of the ancient Pangaean seam. The mountains shake violently, some peaks collapsing in landslides that send clouds of dust miles into the air. Valleys widen. Old coal mines collapse in waves, and at last, the eastern plate breaks free. Not completely, not visibly to the human eye, but the instruments confirm it. A measurable, undeniable separation. The eastern continental slab now moves on its own trajectory, a few centimeters per hour, unimaginably fast for geology. North America has officially begun splitting in half. An event that last happened 200 million years ago is happening again. The world reacts to a continent dying. Satellites capture the moment the central U.S. disappears beneath a new inland sea. News networks broadcast non-stop. Governments declare global emergencies. Scientists are no longer asking if the breakup will continue. They are asking how far it will go. Will the eastern half drift out to sea and form a new island continent? Will the rift widen into a permanent ocean? Will the western half fracture next? One thing is certain. Earth is not done. The planet is still shifting, still groaning, still reshaping the land like clay under a cosmic hand. And humanity can only watch, helpless, awestruck, terrified, and humbled, because the Pangaea Superquake did not destroy the world. It simply reminded us that this world was never ours to control. It moves when it wants. It breaks when it wants. And on this day, Earth remembered it was powerful enough to tear continents apart.